They thought she was just a mechanic, until the judge saw her back tattoo and stood silent. The clang of metal echoed across the Halverston courthouse parking lot as Wren Dalton wiped grease from her hands and returned to her job, changing the flat tire of a bailiff's cruiser like she had a dozen others that week. To most, she was just the quiet mechanic with the low bun and oil-stained sleeves, barely worth a second glance. But when a high-profile assault trial brought an arrogant contractor to court, and Wren was unexpectedly called to testify, something shifted. What started as a dismissive joke about a woman with a wrench unraveled into a courtroom moment so chilling it left a federal judge speechless. Because beneath Wren's faded gray t-shirt was a tattoo, one that few had seen and even fewer understood. And when the judge caught a glimpse of it, everything stopped. What followed wasn't just justice, it was recognition. And a town that finally saw who Wren Dalton really was. The morning hum of diesel engines echoed through the cracked concrete yard of Halverston Auto and Repair. It was 7:12 a.m. when the shop door creaked open and she walked in, exactly on time, like every morning for the past 6 years. Wren Dalton, late 20s, hair always pulled back, work boots laced tight, hands already stained with grease from a rebuilt carburetor she'd worked on before sunrise. She didn't speak much. Most customers thought she was just another small-town mechanic, quiet and efficient. She never wore her name on a patch, just a plain charcoal shirt and faded overalls. No one asked, and she didn't offer. The shop owner, Benny, had long stopped trying to make her talk. He gave her space she earned not with words, but with consistency. Rain or shine, Wren was there, fixing, cleaning, tuning engines like a surgeon with steel nerves. Locals respected her for her work ethic, but they didn't know her. And she liked it that way. Halverston was the kind of town where everyone remembered your past if you let them. So Wren didn't. She lived in a one-room cabin up in the hills, just past the abandoned sawmill. No TV, no internet, no neighbors close enough to knock. Just the forest, the stars, and a folded flag resting on her shelf. At night, she sometimes sat on her porch in silence, sipping black coffee, watching the horizon fade into charcoal. Her fingers would trace the edge of an old metal box under her chair. Inside, sealed and untouched for years, were 4 medals, a worn patch with NSWDG stitched in faded blue, and a photo of 7 teammates, some smiling, some already gone. She never looked at the picture for long. In town, Wren was a ghost with a wrench, silent, capable, unnoticed. Until a kid showed up one Tuesday with a busted radiator and a face full of panic. "My sister's got to get to court in 20 minutes. She's already late. Please, can you?" Wren didn't hesitate, just rolled up her sleeves, knelt, and popped the hood. Coolant hissed. Something deeper was broken, but she didn't say no. As her hands moved, fast and sure, the kid watched her like she was doing magic. Were you, like, military or something?" Wren glanced up. For a second, her eyes locked on his. Calm, heavy. She didn't answer, just tightened one last bolt and handed him the keys. "Go." He stammered a thank you, ran back to the car, and was gone in seconds. She stood in the dust, staring after them. She hadn't heard a military question in years. She thought it would end there, but it wouldn't, because the girl in the back seat of that car was about to walk into a courtroom that would change everything. The county courthouse in Halverston wasn't much to look at. An aging brick rectangle with flickering fluorescent lights and cracked linoleum tiles that whispered under every hurried step. But to Delia Torres, sitting in the back seat of her brother's steaming sedan, it might as well have been a fortress. She clutched a manila folder to her chest, documents, letters, a blurry security cam still. Evidence. Or at least, what she hoped would be enough. The clock above the entrance read 8:03 a.m. They were late. The public defender hadn't shown. Again, the last 2 court dates had been pushed back for scheduling conflicts, and Judge Ramsey had warned her, "Miss another one, and the court will proceed without you." Delia was barely 22, thin as a twig, and looked like she hadn't slept in days. But her eyes held a quiet fire, something resilient. She pushed the door open and ran up the steps. Inside, the courtroom was already in motion. The prosecutor was mid-sentence when Delia entered, trying to catch her breath. The bailiff raised an eyebrow. The judge didn't look up. She took her place at the defendant's table. Alone, charged with theft, accused of stealing catalytic converters from the junkyard where she worked. But Delia swore it wasn't her. She'd seen who did it. She even had part of the footage. But no one would listen. Not the yard owner. Not the cops. Not even the lawyer who stopped returning her calls. The judge finally looked her way. His voice was dry, clinical. "You're late, Miss Torres." I know, Your Honor. My car broke down. That's unfortunate. But this is your third delay. I can explain." "No need," he said, already flipping a page in the file before him. "You can do so under oath." "Bailiff, we'll proceed." She opened her folder with trembling fingers. Pages spilled out onto the desk. The prosecutor smirked. Then the courtroom doors creaked open again. A man entered quietly. Delia turned. It wasn't the lawyer. It was the mechanic. Ren Dalton, covered in oil, still in her overalls. And for a second, Delia wasn't sure if she was dreaming. Ren didn't speak, just walked to the edge of the seating rows, folded her arms, and waited. The judge glanced up, visibly irritated. "Ma'am, this is a closed hearing. Unless you're a witness." "She is," Delia said, her voice gaining a fragile edge of strength. "She saw the car. She fixed it. She can verify I didn't fake the breakdown." The courtroom paused. The prosecutor scoffed. "Your Honor, surely we don't need a mechanic to validate a traffic excuse." But Judge Ramsey held up a hand. His gaze had shifted, focused, a sudden stillness in his posture. He squinted, stared at Ren. Something in her stance, something in her stillness. It tugged at something long buried. And then, from the corner of her oil-stained collar, as Ren shifted her shoulders slightly, just slightly, he saw it. The tail edge of a black ink trident. Half hidden, but unmistakable. His voice caught. His next words came softer. "Ma'am, would you approach the bench, please?" The room fell into a strange quiet as Ren stepped forward. No words, no sound, just the steady, deliberate rhythm of her boots on the tile. Heavy enough to command attention, light enough to feel like memory. Judge Ramsey had straightened in his chair, his brow furrowed in a way the courtroom hadn't seen in years. The man was known for his discipline, his cold efficiency. He never wavered. But now, he was squinting, closer to the present than he'd been in a long time. Ren stopped just before the bench. She didn't offer a greeting, just nodded. Ramsey leaned forward, lowering his voice. "That tattoo." Ren didn't answer. "You served?" he asked again, quieter. She gave a small nod, the kind of nod that carried 1,000 pages of declassified silence. "Which unit?" he pressed, but this time it wasn't courtroom protocol. It was personal. His voice had softened, no longer judicial, but reverent. Ren tilted her head slightly. Her eyes never left his. "You know which one," she said. 3 seconds passed. Then the judge exhaled through his nose, closed the folder in front of him, and turned off the mic. "You don't forget that ink," he murmured. "I haven't seen it since '09. Red Rock Canyon." Ren's jaw tightened. Something flickered behind her eyes. "You were there?" she asked. He nodded. "I was on the ground team," he said quietly. "Jag support, embedded. Lost 3 men before sunrise. And someone dragged me out of the kill zone with half a lung left." I never saw her face. Ren didn't smile, just blinked. Then her hand lifted and slowly tapped the left side of her ribs. "You were screaming in Pashto. I thought you were the enemy at first." The judge stared at her. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass. The courtroom hadn't moved. The bailiff glanced at the prosecutor, who sat frozen, unsure whether the proceedings had shifted into something sacred or political. Ramsey cleared his throat. "Turn on the mic again. Miss Dalton, are you willing to offer a statement regarding Miss Torres' claim?" Ren nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." "Swear her in." The bailiff approached. Ren raised her right hand. She didn't flinch as the words came. "I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth." Her voice wasn't loud, but it had a weight behind it. Like granite, like something that had been forged through fire and never quite cooled. Ramsey leaned back in his chair, his composure slowly returning, but not all the way. As Ren stepped into the witness box, The judge didn't look at her the same way anymore. Neither did the room. She wasn't just a mechanic now. She was something else. Something remembered. Ren sat in the witness box with the quiet poise of someone who had waited in darker places, under heavier pressure, for far longer than anyone here could understand. Her posture was straight. Her hands rested calmly on her lap. She didn't fidget. She didn't shift. Judge Ramsey gave her a subtle nod. "You may proceed." The prosecutor rose, adjusting his tie, clearly trying to reclaim control of the room. "Miss Dalton, you claim you assisted the defendant this morning. Can you explain the nature of that assistance?" Ren didn't blink. Her brother brought in a busted Honda Civic at 7:12 a.m. I opened the hood, diagnosed the radiator, pinhole rupture. Pressure valve blew from overheating. I patched it enough for a short distance drive. Sent them on their way by 7:41. "And you're certain it was this defendant in the car?" "She was in the back seat," Ren said, pale, holding a folder to her chest. She didn't speak. "But yeah, I remember her." The prosecutor nodded stiffly. "And you have a timestamp?" "A receipt." "No receipt. I didn't charge them." A flicker of smugness crossed the prosecutor's face. "Then your testimony is anecdotal." Ren tilted her head, gaze steady. "You want a timestamp? Pull the CCTV from the gas station across the street. They have front-facing cameras. My shop's in frame." The prosecutor hesitated. Judge Ramsey raised an eyebrow. "Counselor, I suggest you do just that." The courtroom stirred. Then Delia spoke up, her voice tentative. "Can I say something, Your Honor?" Ramsey looked to her, nodding once. She didn't just fix the car. She didn't ask questions, didn't roll her eyes. Everyone else did. She just helped. And I knew she didn't want to be noticed. But I couldn't stop thinking about the way she looked at me. Ramsey turned back to Ren. "You didn't have to come here," he said. "I know," she replied. "So why did you?" Ren was quiet for a beat. Then she spoke, and this time, it wasn't just about Delia. "Because I know what it's like when no one believes you. When the people who should stand up for you don't. Sometimes it only takes one voice in the room." Ramsey nodded slowly. He folded his hands, gaze lingering on the oil streaks still drying on her sleeves. Then his eyes drifted again, briefly, to the ink beneath her collar. The prosecutor sat down without another word. And for the first time that morning, Delia stopped shaking. Ren stood, waiting to be dismissed. She wasn't looking for thanks. She wasn't looking for recognition. She just looked at Delia, gave her the smallest nod, one warrior to another, and turned to leave. But Judge Ramsey's voice stopped her. "Miss Dalton." She turned. "That tattoo," he said carefully. "It's rare to see one like that outside of Arlington." Ren looked at him. Quiet. Resolute. "I carry it for those who didn't come back." Then she walked out. By noon, the air in Halverston buzzed with something unspoken. The courthouse emptied slowly, but the silence Ren left behind lingered like a scent no one could place. The bailiff had whispered something to the clerk. The clerk told the receptionist. By the time the prosecutor left the building, the mechanic from Halverston Auto and Repair was no longer just a name with grease under her fingernails. She was a question, a rumor wrapped in engine oil and scars. Back at the shop, Ren didn't mention a thing. She clocked back in like it was any other Tuesday. Changed the oil on a 97 Silverado. Rewired a taillight. Ate her lunch in silence, an apple and a protein bar, same as every day, and kept her back to the office door. But Benny noticed. The call started coming in just after 2. Not for repairs, at least, not really. "Is it true?" a woman asked, voice shaky. "Did you serve with the SEALs?" Another asked about her rates, but couldn't stop asking about the tattoo. Ren gave the same answer every time. "If you need your car looked at, bring it in. Otherwise, I can't help you." She wasn't angry, just tired. She'd seen what happened when attention crept in. Recognition, praise, it had a way of turning into something else. Curiosity, expectation, misunderstanding. She'd left that behind for a reason. But by the time she locked the gate at sundown, a folded note had been left under the windshield of her truck. It was written in rushed handwriting. "You probably don't remember me. My brother didn't make it back. But I think you were the one who stood at the funeral. I was 10. You saluted like he mattered. Thank you." Ren stared at the note a long while. She didn't recognize the name. That didn't surprise her. There had been too many funerals, too many flags folded, too many moments where silence had to do the talking. That night, she didn't go straight home. She drove up through the North Pass, out where the wind bent the treetops and the gravel roads turned soft from disuse. She stopped at an overlook. The valley below was painted in shades of orange and violet as the sun dipped low. She stepped out of the truck and opened the metal box. The medals were still there. The patch. The photo. She ran a finger across one face in particular, a man with a lopsided grin and haunted eyes. She hadn't said his name out loud in years. The stars were just starting to break through the dusk when she heard a soft crunch behind her. Boots. She turned. It was Judge Ramsey. No robe, just jeans and a jacket. He looked older now, less like the man behind a bench, and more like a man trying to remember what silence meant. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said. Wren said nothing. He nodded anyway. "I wanted to say thank you." "For what?" she asked. "For reminding me who I used to be." The wind tugged gently at Wren's sleeve as she stood beside her truck, eyes still on the box resting in the passenger seat. The judge remained a respectful distance away, hands in his coat pockets, his gaze fixed on the tree like it held answers he no longer expected to find. Wren didn't invite conversation, but she didn't walk away either. That, in its own quiet way, was permission. Ramsey cleared his throat. "I never got to thank her. The one who pulled me out. I always thought I imagined her. A ghost. She never left a name. No one else saw." Wren didn't respond immediately. She shut the lid of the box, gently, almost reverently, then turned toward him. "She didn't need a name," Wren said. "Just a job. She did it." Ramsey nodded slowly. "I used to think there were people in this world who just carried more weight. Quietly, without making others feel it. You reminded me of that today." She gave him a faint look, almost a smile, but not quite. "People don't really want to know who we were," Wren said. "Not really. They want stories. Clean ones. Hero stuff. But we don't come back clean." He took a long breath. "You came back alive." "Barely," she whispered. "Most of me didn't." Ramsey looked down at the gravel beneath his feet, then up again. "You know, I didn't expect to ever see that trident again. Especially not in a courtroom like today. I had to stop myself from saluting." "That would have been awkward," Wren said softly. The faintest flicker of humor crossed her eyes. They stood in silence for a while after that. The sky darkened. The stars brightened. And the mountain wind spoke through the trees in a language older than memory. Finally, the judge spoke again. "There's something you should know. That girl, Delia, she won't be charged. Your testimony changed everything. The DA dropped the case an hour after you left. The yard owner's statement didn't hold up under pressure." Wren nodded once. That was enough. But then Ramsey stepped closer, voice lower now. "You left something behind when you walked out. More than you meant to." She raised an eyebrow. "You gave everyone in that room a reason to pay attention," he said. "Not to you, necessarily, but to what dignity looks like when it walks in quiet." She didn't reply. Not directly. Instead, she reached into the pocket of her coat and pulled out something small, a dog tag, scuffed and darkened by age. She held it out for a second, let him see the name, then tucked it back into her coat. "That's who I carry," she said simply. Ramsey gave her a long look, then offered his hand. She shook it, a firm, grounded grip, no flair, no flourish. And with that, he turned and left. No more words needed. As his footsteps faded into the night, Wren looked up at the stars again. She wasn't alone. Not really. Not ever. The next morning came cold and gray. Fog hugged the hills and curled beneath the streetlights like ghosts refusing to let go. At Halverston Auto and Repair, Wren arrived early. Earlier than usual. The sun hadn't even cracked the horizon. She rolled open the main garage door and stepped inside, her boots echoing in the stillness. The scent of motor oil, steel, and old coffee greeted her like an old friend. It was the kind of silence she trusted, pure, functional, honest. She got to work without music, without distraction. Just the clink of tools, the soft hum of fluorescent lights, and the rhythm of her breath. Under the hood, her mind could drift without losing control. It was her version of prayer, but the quiet didn't last. At 7:32 a.m., Benny walked in holding a folded newspaper and a look on his face that Ren didn't like. He didn't speak right away, just held the paper out to her, lips pressed in a thin line. She wiped her hands on a rag, reluctantly took it. Front page. Local column. From Wrench to Warrior. The Mechanic Who Silenced a Courtroom. By Lila Jameson, Halverston Weekly Observer. Ren's name was printed clearly. The story pieced together her testimony, hinted at her military past, and described the moment Judge Ramsey recognized her, right down to the tattoo. There was even a blurry photo. From a distance, outside the courthouse. Her silhouette. Her back. Her breath caught. You didn't tell anyone? Benny asked. Ren's voice was low. No. You want me to call the paper? Tell them to retract it. She folded the paper without reading further and set it on the bench. Doesn't matter. Benny looked at her for a long moment. You're not just a mechanic, are you? I am now, she said. But the edge in her voice didn't convince either of them. He nodded slowly. Well, if the phone rings off the hook today, you just let me know. I'll handle it. She gave him a grateful glance. But the day didn't go as expected. There weren't calls, not many. No media vans. No interviews. Instead, the first to show up was the girl from court. Delia. She walked in with her brother, holding a tray of 2 black coffees and a small paper bag. Didn't know how you'd take it, she said. So he guessed. Ren raised an eyebrow but took the cup with a nod. Delia didn't say much at first. She looked around the shop, at the shelves and the parts and the oil-stained floor. This place suits you, she said finally. Ren smirked. Not much conversation here. Delia stepped closer, hesitating. I just wanted to say thank you. You didn't have to show up. I did, Ren said. Because someone needs to show up every time. Delia swallowed. Her voice cracked just slightly. People never show up for me. Ren met her eyes. Steady. Strong. They will now. By early afternoon, Ren had gone back to her rhythm. Hands deep in the undercarriage of a Dodge Ram, sweat clinging to her temples, knuckles scraped raw from rusted bolts. The visit from Delia had left her thoughtful, but she tucked the emotion away like she always did, out of sight, behind focus and function. That was the thing about Ren. She never ran from emotion. She just never invited it to linger. The phone didn't ring. The customers who came in that day were respectful, maybe even quieter than usual. A few made longer eye contact. One man, a retired Marine with a silver star stitched on his ball cap, offered a silent nod and handed her his keys without a word. She returned the nod. No salute. No story. Just mutual understanding. By closing time, she was bone-tired. Not physically, that she could handle, but that other kind of tired. The one that weighed in the chest and made everything feel just a little heavier. She went to the small break room at the back of the shop to wash up. That's when she saw it. A plain white envelope, unmarked, resting on the workbench where she kept her tools. Her name wasn't on it, but someone had written 3 words on the front. You should know. She stared at it a long time before touching it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No signature, just a typewritten message. Asterisk, I was at the hearing. I recognized the tattoo. I was 3rd Squad, Fallujah, 2010. You pulled my CO from a burning Humvee. He didn't make it, but I never forgot your face. I saw the photo in the paper. I just wanted you to know, someone remembered. Asterisk. Ren sat down, the letter in one hand, a trembling breath in the other. Fallujah, 2010. She hadn't thought about that night in years. The screaming, the smoke, the gunfire rattling like bones in a coffin. The way she dragged Captain Evers through 200 yards of broken glass and blood, praying with every step. He died in the medevac chopper. They'd told her it was a waste of effort. But someone had remembered. She folded the letter carefully, set it inside her toolbox, right beside the dog tag. For the rest of the night, she worked in silence. But something had shifted. Something inside her chest that had been locked down for years had clicked open just a little. A quiet acknowledgement. A piece of herself coming back into the light. As she locked up the shop, a breeze moved through the alley. Soft, warm, almost like a whisper. And for the first time in a long time, Ren didn't feel invisible. The next morning brought rain. Not the dramatic, thundering kind, but a gentle, persistent drizzle that softened the world, made the roads shine like black mirrors, and wrapped the town of Halverston in a quiet hush. Wren arrived before dawn, as always. But today, something was different. There was a car already parked outside the shop, an old Buick, blue and sun-faded. No one inside. No movement. Just the car. And a note tucked under the driver's side wiper blade in crisp, weatherproof plastic. Wren approached slowly, cautiously, every instinct honed by years of patrols and protocol. She scanned the lot, the rooftops, the street corners. Nothing. She pulled the note. Typed again. One line. Thank you for saving him. I never got the chance to tell you. I was 12. No signature. Just a heart drawn in pen beside the words. Wren exhaled. This was the third message in as many days. Not all in person. Not all face-to-face. But word was spreading. She didn't want fame. Never had. But there was a strange grace in these silent acknowledgments. Like whispers from lives she had touched. Lives that had kept going after hers had broken apart. It was strange how a tattoo could speak louder than 1,000 words. Back inside, Benny waited with 2 mugs of black coffee. No questions. Just presence. He slid one across the workbench. You good? Wren took it without answering. She sipped. The warmth grounded her. Benny leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You know, I saw that tattoo once. Years ago, before I hired you. Wren raised an eyebrow. He shrugged. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. You look like someone who earned silence. She gave him a faint smirk. Most people ask. Most people don't know what they're asking. She nodded at that. Then he looked down at his feet. Thoughtful. You ever think about telling people? Not the paper, not the town, but just someone. Wren didn't answer at first. Then, I did. Once. Who? My brother. Benny blinked. You never mentioned a brother. Yeah, she said softly, staring into her mug. That's because I don't anymore. The room fell still. She took a slow breath, then stood, setting the coffee aside. Time to get back under the hood. Benny watched her go. Back into the bay, back into the hum of machines and steel and control. But something lingered in the air. A shift. Not weakness. Just memory. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something harder than silence. Healing. The night settled over Halverston like a thick velvet curtain, soft and suffocating in its quietude. Inside Wren's small cabin, the only light came from a flickering oil lamp perched on the rough-hewn wooden table. Its warm glow barely held back the shadows that crept along the walls. Shadows that whispered stories of battles long past and memories carefully locked away. Wren sat alone, her silhouette stoic against the dim light. The day's events weighed heavily on her chest, the kind of heaviness that no physical wound could cause. Her fingers, calloused and steady from years of handling machinery and weapons alike, reached into a worn leather satchel resting beside her chair. From within, she pulled out a stack of letters, each one folded and creased from years of storage. The paper was yellowed, edges frayed. These were messages from the families of fallen comrades, from old friends who never forgot, and from voices silenced too soon, but still echoing in the quiet corridors of her mind. Carefully, she unfolded one and traced the neat handwriting with a trembling fingertip. The words were simple, yet heavy. Your brother was proud to have served beside you. Another spoke of a funeral wreath laid at a distant military cemetery, a small gesture of gratitude that had never reached her. Between the letters rested a photograph, faded but unmistakable. 7 faces looking back at her, some smiling through the weight of hardship, some haunted by things no photograph could capture. The man with the lopsided grin and haunted eyes was there, too, though he was gone from this world, but never from her memory. The room was still except for the soft rustle of paper and the distant howl of the wind through the pines. For a moment, the past seemed to press into the present with a force that was almost unbearable. Then came a knock at the door. Soft, tentative. Wren's breath caught. The photo lingered in her hand as she turned toward the sound. The knock came again, lighter this time, almost hesitant. She rose slowly, moving toward the door with the grace and caution of someone who had learned to expect the unexpected. When she opened it, there stood Delia, the young woman whose own struggle had brought them together. Her eyes were wide but steady, filled with a mixture of hope and determination that Ren recognized immediately. "I thought you might need some company," Delia said quietly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Ren didn't respond right away. She closed the door behind her and gestured toward the worn armchair beside the oil lamp. Delia sat, folding her hands in her lap. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was thick, but not uncomfortable. It was a silence filled with understanding, the kind that only grows between those who have walked through fire in very different ways. Delia broke the quiet first. She spoke of her own battles, being judged unfairly, dismissed, and feeling invisible in a world that was quick to overlook her. The fear of never being believed. The exhaustion of fighting alone. Ren listened, her own silence a steady presence, a balm to the young woman's fears. She thought of her own story, the missions she never spoke of, the comrades she lost, the pain she carried in silence. The unfairness of war, and the loneliness of coming home to a world that no longer seemed to understand. In this humble cabin, with the soft glow of the lamp casting long shadows on the walls, a bond began to form, a bridge between two lives shaped by struggle and resilience. Ren realized, for the first time in years, that her fight was no longer hers alone. It belonged, in some small way, to those who needed her now, those who had been overlooked and unheard. Together, they shared stories neither had planned to tell. The night stretched on, full of quiet revelations, and for the first time in a long time, Ren felt a fragile hope take root. She wasn't alone anymore. The morning air was sharp and cold, biting at the edges of the small town as Ren pulled up to Halverston Auto and Repair just before dawn. The rising sun hadn't yet softened the world, and the quiet streets seemed to hold their breath, as if anticipating something. Ren moved with the same steady precision she had cultivated over years, every step measured, every motion deliberate. The leather of her work boots scraped softly against the cracked pavement as she unlocked the garage door, revealing the familiar scent of motor oil, grease, and worn steel. The shop was her sanctuary, a place where things could be fixed, where control was possible. As she set to work, the soft hum of the radio filled the space with distant country melodies, but the peaceful rhythm was shattered when the front door opened abruptly. Benny appeared first, his face tight and uncharacteristically grim. Behind him, a group of men and women entered, officials from the county, their crisp suits and clipped voices stark contrasts to the dusty workbenches and tool-strewn floors. "We need to speak with management," the lead official announced, his tone formal and businesslike. Benny nodded stiffly but gestured to Ren. "She's the lead mechanic." The officials exchanged quick glances but turned their attention to Ren. One of them cleared his throat and began. "We're conducting a zoning review of this property. There's concern that the current operation doesn't comply with updated municipal codes. It may require a shutdown or relocation." Ren listened carefully, the words washing over her, but failing to unsettle her. She had dealt with pressure before, the kind that didn't come from wrenches or engines, but from bureaucracy and quiet battles for survival. When an official turned toward her with a dismissive smile and said, "This isn't your fight," Ren's jaw clenched and her gaze hardened. "This is my fight," she replied steadily. "This shop isn't just a building. It's a lifeline for this town. People come here because they trust us. They count on us. I'm not just a mechanic. I'm part of this community." Her voice was calm, but it carried the quiet fire of someone who had faced far worse, the unyielding discipline of years spent in the shadows of conflict, where surrender was never an option. The officials shifted uncomfortably, surprised by the resolve they hadn't expected. Ren continued, "You can make your reports and your plans, but remember, you'll have to answer to the people who depend on this place. And I'm one of them." The lead official hesitated, then gave a nod. "We'll take your concerns under advisement." Benny stepped closer and gave Ren a proud nod, his respect for her deepening in that moment. The confrontation left the air thick with tension, but as the day unfolded, the shop continued its steady rhythm. Customers came and went, farmers, delivery drivers, town residents. all greeted by Ren's quiet competence and steady hands. That evening, as Ren prepared to close, she noticed something pinned to the dusty bulletin board near the back door. A small note scrawled hastily on a scrap of paper. Not all battles are fought on foreign soil. Stay strong. Her fingers brushed the faded ink, and a faint smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. She understood that battle well. No gunfire, no medals, but no less vital. Some fights were quieter, fought in boardrooms and behind closed doors, fights for respect, for survival, for community. And Ren Dalton was ready for every one of them. The morning fog lay thick over Halverston, wrapping the town in a muted gray silence that felt almost sacred. Ren's truck rolled slowly into the parking lot of Halverston Auto and Repair, tires humming against wet asphalt slick with overnight dew. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and pine, a quiet reminder that the world outside had its own rhythm, indifferent to the battles she carried beneath her skin. She stepped out, her boots meeting the pavement with deliberate calm. The door creaked open, releasing the familiar sense of motor oil, worn leather, and cold metal. The shop was a sanctuary, quiet, ordered, and steady, a stark contrast to the chaos she'd once known. But today, something had changed. The atmosphere inside the shop was charged with whispers and sideways glances. Word had spread, quietly but swiftly, about her courtroom appearance and the moment Judge Ramsey recognized the tattoo on her back. The local community, once oblivious, was now grappling with the truth of the woman they'd underestimated. Vinny approached cautiously, holding a folded newspaper in his hands. The headline was bold, almost impossible to ignore. Local mechanics' military past sparks community reflection. Ren's lips pressed into a thin line. She wasn't sure she wanted this kind of attention, the kind that stirred memories better left untouched and demanded explanations she wasn't ready to give. Before she could say a word, the shop door swung open with unexpected force. All eyes turned as a tall, confident figure stepped inside. His posture was rigid but carried the ease of someone who had long since mastered control. His jacket was simple, civilian, but the presence he carried was unmistakable. Ren Dalton, the man said, his voice steady but warm. "It's good to see you." Ren's gaze sharpened as she took in the newcomer. "Major Daniel Harper," she replied, voice calm but guarded. "I didn't expect to find you in Halverston." He gave a faint smile, one born of shared history. "Neither did I, but I came for a reason." They moved toward the back office, away from the curious eyes and murmurs of the shop floor. The familiar sounds of wrenches and engines dimmed behind the closed door, leaving a space heavy with unspoken questions. Harper took a seat, folding his hands on the desk with quiet deliberation. "I heard about the courtroom," he began, voice low. "The judge recognizing your tattoo, your testimony. It stirred up some memories for those of us who never forgot." Ren's eyes flickered with a flash of distant pain, shadows of nights spent in war zones surfacing unbidden. "It's been a long time," she murmured. "It has," Harper agreed. "But the unit remembers. And so do I. Your actions in Fallujah, pulling Captain Evers from that burning Humvee, saved more than just lives. You saved hope. You saved the soul of the team." Ren shook her head, a slow, tired smile touching her lips. "I didn't come back for recognition or support." Harper's gaze softened, understanding the weight behind her words. "I know, but sometimes support isn't about the past. It's about what comes next. You don't have to carry it all alone anymore." The room was silent for a moment, heavy with the weight of history and the promise of something new. Outside, the sun pierced the fog, sending golden shafts of light across the quiet street. For the first time in years, Ren felt a flicker of connection, not just to the past, but to the possibility of a future. Maybe it was time to stop hiding in the shadows. Maybe it was time to stand tall. Word traveled quickly through Halverston, carried on whispered conversations and lingering glances. Ren's courtroom testimony and Major Harper's unexpected visit had shifted something in the town's collective consciousness. No longer was she just the quiet mechanic with grease under her nails. She had become a figure of respect, a living link to sacrifices many barely understood. One warm afternoon, as Wren worked beneath the hood of an aging pickup truck, Benny's voice cut through the soft clinks of tools and the distant hum of the shop's compressors. "You've got visitors." She wiped the sweat from her brow and looked up to see a small crowd gathered near the entrance. Neighbors, farmers, local shop owners, even some town officials who had once questioned the shop's place in the community. They carried signs that read, "Thank you, Wren, and Halverston stands with you." The air was thick with quiet solidarity. Wren's hands froze on the wrench. The noise in her chest grew loud enough to drown out the chatter around her. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure if she was ready for this. Slowly, she set the tool aside and stepped outside, the afternoon sun casting long shadows behind her. The crowd grew still as she faced them, their eyes bright with admiration and gratitude. "I never asked for this," she began, voice steady but soft, laced with humility. "I'm just doing what needs to be done." An older farmer with weathered skin stepped forward. His voice was low but firm. "You've done more than that, Wren. You've reminded us what it means to stand strong, even when no one's watching." A mother holding her child nodded, her eyes glistening. "You're proof that those who serve quietly carry the heaviest burdens, and we owe them more than we say." Other voices joined, murmuring their agreement. Wren's gaze swept the crowd, faces marked by years of hardship and hope, bound together by shared respect. She felt something deep inside shift, a fragile, new sense of belonging. In that moment, she was more than a mechanic. She was a symbol of resilience, a quiet hero for a town remembering how to honor those who give everything without fanfare. As the gathering slowly dispersed, Delia approached quietly and slipped a folded envelope into Wren's hand. Inside was a photograph, the 7 faces of the unit, captured forever in a moment of defiant camaraderie. Wren held it close, a silent promise that their stories would not be forgotten. The sun dipped low behind the hills of Halverston, casting long amber shadows across the dusty road leading to Wren's cabin. Crickets had already begun their nightly symphony, and the warm breeze carried the scent of cedar and motor oil, a strange blend that somehow felt like home. On the porch, Wren sat with her elbows on her knees, the old photograph Delia had given her resting in her palms. The image was frayed at the edges, its color slightly faded. 7 faces stared back at her, strong, defiant, alive. Her old unit, brothers and sisters in arms. Wren's thumb hovered over Captain Evers, the man with the crooked smile and perpetually dirty boots, who used to sneak rations to strays in Kandahar. He was gone now. So were 2 others in the picture. What remained was memory. Wait, ghosts that whispered only when the world was quiet enough to hear them. The screen door creaked open behind her. Benny. He carried 2 mugs, the scent of black coffee rising between them. "Didn't figure you for a night owl," he said gently, stepping outside. Wren glanced at him with a tired smile. "Didn't figure you for someone who drinks it this late." He offered her a mug, then settled into the chair beside her. The wood groaned under his weight, but the silence between them was comfortable. Familiar, as if they'd sat like this 100 nights before, though they never had. They sipped quietly for a while. Stars began to blink overhead. "You don't talk much about it," Benny said finally, keeping his eyes on the treeline. "Your service, I mean." Wren took a slow breath. "There's a lot I could say, but most of it wouldn't make sense unless you were there." He nodded, not pressing. She set the photo down on the railing, propped against a flower pot. "We weren't heroes every day. Some days we were just surviving. And some days, surviving was enough." Benny leaned back, taking that in. Wren's voice was soft, but steady. "Evers saved a kid once, dragged him out of a collapsed bakery after a blast. No cameras, no medals. Just dust and blood and quiet prayers. He didn't make it home, but the kid did. That has to count for something." "It does," Benny said, his voice thick. The wind shifted, brushing her hair back from her face. "I tried to disappear after I left," she continued. "Thought if I kept my head down, if I just turned wrenches and kept busy, the noise would stop. But it never really does. Not unless you let it breathe." He nodded again, this time slower. "That's why you didn't run from the courtroom. Or the judge. Or the town. No, Ren said. Because someone needed to stand. Might as well be someone who already knows how. They sat there for a long while after that. Two people watching the stars from the edge of nowhere. A soldier and a friend, saying little, understanding everything. And above them, the night sky shimmered like a flag no one could see, stitched from silence, honor, and the quiet kind of courage that asks for nothing in return. The next morning came quiet and slow, but not without purpose. Ren was already awake before the sun kissed the horizon, standing at the edge of the clearing behind her cabin. She wore the same black tank top from the day before, the same oil-stained jeans, but something about her posture had changed. The weight she carried hadn't vanished. No, it was still there, etched into her bones, but now it had a shape, a direction, a reason. The engine from her old truck rumbled behind the cabin. Benny had stayed the night, sleeping in his pickup by the woodshed, more out of loyalty than necessity. When he stepped out, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, he saw her standing there, quiet, deliberate, as if communing with something older than both of them. "You heading somewhere?" he asked. She didn't turn around. "Back to the shop first, then into town. I've got work to finish." Judge left things kind of open-ended. "He left things visible," she said. "Now I make sure it stays that way." Benny exhaled through his nose. "You ever going to tell me what that tattoo means?" Ren turned at last. Her eyes met his, not evasive, but piercing. "It means I don't need to explain myself to anyone who doesn't know how to ask." He smiled despite himself. "Guess that answers that." As they drove into town, a quiet shift had taken place. Word had spread. It always did in places like Halverston. The mechanic with the ink and the quiet eyes wasn't just some vet anymore. She was that vet, the one the judge stood for, the one who faced the courtroom with no lawyer, no defense, and no shame. When Rin pulled up to the shop, she found someone already waiting outside. Delia. She held a clipboard, a rolled-up blueprint under one arm, and the same fire in her expression from days before. Only now, it carried direction instead of desperation. "You really meant it," Delia said. Ren stepped out of the truck. "I did." Delia handed her the clipboard. "The vet center. I talked to Benny. He's in. I've got the zoning paperwork. All it needs is a site lead. Someone people respect." Ren scanned the forms briefly, then looked up at her. "I'm not a symbol." "No," Delia said, smiling. "You're the foundation." Behind them, the sun climbed higher, catching the edges of the town, the shop, and the rusted nameplate on the garage wall. Ren's auto and diesel. It hadn't changed, but the people who passed it now looked twice. Not because of what they saw, but because of what they now knew. And somewhere deep inside, for the first time in years, Ren allowed herself the smallest breath of pride. The sky over Halverston that evening stretched wide and deep, streaked with the soft golds and oranges of a sun reluctant to set. There was a quietness in the air, not empty, but full of something unseen but deeply felt, like the echo of a vow spoken long ago. Ren stood at the far edge of the community lot, beside a newly installed wooden sign that read, Halverston Veterans Resource and Repair Cooperative. The wood was still raw, the lettering hand-painted. Delia stood a few feet away with a hammer in her hand, a smear of paint on her cheek, and a smile brighter than any she'd worn before. Around them, volunteers worked to clear the ground, moving old debris, raising temporary structures, sketching future blueprints with chalk and hope. It wasn't much yet, but it was something. It was starting. Ren turned toward the group and caught sight of someone approaching through the thinning dusk. Judge Ramsey. He walked slowly, no robe, just a well-worn coat and the gait of a man who'd seen more life than the courthouse allowed. He carried a small wooden box in his hands, and when he reached Ren, he paused, not out of hesitation, but out of reverence. "I wasn't sure you'd be here," he said. "I'm always here," Ren replied, voice low but steady. He extended the box. "This belonged to my brother, Sergeant First Class Daniel Ramsey. Died in Kandahar. He carried this photo in his kit. I saw your face in it. 8 years before I saw your back in that courtroom." Ren opened the box. Inside was a weathered photograph. Her unit. That same smile. That same desert sky. She had been standing behind Ramsey, hand on his shoulder. The judge cleared his throat. I couldn't protect him, but I can honor him. And you? Ren nodded, not trusting her voice. The judge gave her one last look, then turned and left, his figure swallowed by the shadows. Later, under the low glow of a shop light, Ren sat alone. She pulled off her jacket and let the warm breeze touch her bare shoulders. The tattoo was still there, black ink, faded but sharp. A dagger through a trident, wings spread wide. The mark of an elite. But now people knew, and for the first time, she didn't mind. A young boy, no more than 10, wandered by holding his father's hand. He paused when he saw her. "That's a cool tattoo," the boy said shyly. Ren smiled. "It meant I had people worth fighting for." The boy nodded. "Do you still?" She looked across the field, at Benny, at Delia, at the volunteers building something that would outlast all of them, and answered, softly, "I do now." And as the stars came out, Ren Dalton, soldier, mechanic, sister-in-arms, finally allowed herself to breathe. Not as someone forgotten, but as someone remembered. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Stay tuned for more immersive tactical stories.